All right. Third Sunday of Advent. Pink candle. This is a special day. It's a special day. We're three-quarters of the way through. Yesterday, to just sort of leverage yesterday, we were working with sacred time. We're in a sacred time now. Actually, we're always in a sacred time. You can't, we're always in eternity. This is what we're going to have to start to grapple with. We're always in eternity. And that's absolutely real. Time is relatively real. And it's really handy because you guys showed up by 11 o'clock clock time. So I mean, time, time exists, but chronos exists, clock time exists, and it's a tool, so we use it. But let's not take it too seriously. It's relatively real. If you don't believe me, go out and hug your nearest tree and ask them what time it is. It's relatively real. Eternity is absolutely real. So we were working with a kind of sacred roundabout of time, and about 1,000 years in their wisdom. One of the wisdom moments of the Catholic Church. There's certainly been moments of great darkness too. We won't go into that. But one of the things was they put the year in a kind of roundabout. And now we're actually at the start. I mean, where does a circle start? That's why the circle is the image of eternity. You can't find where a circle starts, but the liturgical year in Christianity sort of starts where we are now in Advent. Something's coming, something big's coming. So we're starting there. We're actually starting in winter. It's set that way. And if you get a chance, you have 30 minutes to spare some time and you want to find out what we really looked into yesterday, that should be up on YouTube. Maybe it's already up there now. Jared puts them up and he's in Atlanta with Elizabeth. So might not be till tomorrow, but it's just called the Sacred Roundabout. And then you can really leverage what we did yesterday. But I'll give you an image from yesterday and we'll work with this image. This turned out to be the most resonant image, this old Japanese teacup. And the short story behind this cup was it comes out of Zen literature. A Zen scholar at the University of Tokyo, it was amazing that around 1900 they were already into this hamster wheel of publish or perish. Even the Japanese, even a Zen scholar was caught up in that cycle, that little hamster wheel. And so he needed to get something out there, and so he heard about a Zen master that wasn't too far from Tokyo that had never been interviewed. And he figured, well, I'll go interview the guy. Well, he gets there and to the address he had, and there was a shack, no door on it, nothing in the shack except for a tatami mat and this little guy with a little table, and he's whisking green tea there. And so the guy knocks on the door lintel, no door even to knock on. And all of this is symbolic of what the Zen guys are trying to tell you, no door. And he said, gave his whole who he was, PhD or whatever. And then he said, I'm here to talk to the Zen. He said, well, the little guy says, well, sorry, somebody's been fooling you or whatever. I don't know who you're talking about, but why don't you come in? It's before you go back to Tokyo. It won't be a total loss. You're going to have a cup of green tea. So the guy sits down. Well, of course, this is the Zen master. He's just reeling this guy in. And so he gives him this cup and he just starts pouring the tea. And then it goes all the way up and then it starts overflowing all over the mat. And the professor says, it's full up. It's full. And the Zen master, he puts the kettle down and he takes the cup and he dumps it all out on the tatami. And he says, like this cup, you two are full of it. And I don't know what that would be in the Japanese, but that's how it comes across. You two are full of it. And he says, you can't learn anything from me or of Zen until you empty your cup. The empty cup, it's called. Paul Reps collected this in a bunch of stories from Zen. It's called The Empty Cup. So this was a key image that really affected people, because this is like Advent for adults. Uh, People think that Christmas is for children, and well, we've made it so. We've made it so. But this is Advent for adults. This is what Advent is about. If you're full up to the top, you'll have that. You can't learn anything new. Nothing can come in. You see, as one of my junior high girls wrote in her reading log one time, SOSDD, same old shit, different day. Well, why is that? Well, because there's no room for anything new. So this is contemplation right here. This is contemplation for adults. You don't show up and sit in silence expecting to get something. This is what we do. We empty. We empty. See. So that was a key image. And in about 20 minutes, I'll stop talking, and then we'll go into silence, and then we'll do this for 20 minutes. Every time your mind starts to fill up with some great idea, even enlightenment. Yeah. So that's one of the key images. I call it, Advent for adults, and Merton's going to help, because, the reason we're here is, whether you know it or not, is Thomas Merton brought us all here. Even if you don't know anything about Thomas Merton, the reason that we're here together is Merton. 40 years ago in the 80s, things were coming apart and coming together, and unbelievable the way we talked about when we talk about the sacred roundabout. Sometimes things have to fall apart before they come together in a new form. My marriage was falling apart, but I was starting to read Thomas Merton. And beware, because once you start reading Thomas Merton, it's like, once you get the Merton bug, it's like a virus. You never quite ever get rid of it. And I'm still reading Merton all the time. And so I'm reading Merton, and then miracle of miracles, grace, in the middle of, marriage falling apart, I get an invite to the Abbey for a week. I can bring 25 of my students from Houston. Never happened before. And it never has happened since in their entire history. So, how can you explain it other than grace? And so I took these guys up. I met Father Gregory, the guest master. We hit it off. I came back the next year with 25 more crazy cowboys, high school cowboys, and we loved it. We loved it. And then in that process, my marriage fell apart and came back together again, more grace. And so we quit our jobs without having jobs in Kentucky. And we said, we're going to come up, because I said, I got to work with this guy. I got to find out more about what these guys know, in the Merton vein. And Pam agreed, and we moved. And here we are. I'm still reading Merton. And it was helpful because in a few years, we moved up here, really 40 years ago, 1982, when I started teaching up here. Pam and I started teaching. And it was only a few years later than that I got involved with Haiti. All of a sudden, I'm working, going to Haiti and raising money for Haiti. And if I had not had the 4 years with Gregory, and if I had not had Merton to teach me about prayer, I don't think I would have been able to go to Haiti. Because the first time I went to Haiti, it was like, wow, if I didn't have some way to pray, there just was no way you make it through something like that. Because what you see in Haiti, I could not pray. And thank goodness I had a little bit of help from Merton. And still to this day, now 37 years of working with Haiti, probably over 20 trips, I would guess. I've lost count. I pray my way through that all the time. And not only Merton, the Pema Chodron, those of you who know about Tonglen, they're like Tonglen retreats when I go there, because it allows me to keep going. So prayer, I want to talk a little bit about prayer and what I've learned from Merton. We heard Merton's prayer in the beginning, and we'll use it to lead us into contemplative prayer, in a few minutes when we do that. But, you know, Merton taught me a lot about prayer. He said, prayer is not an attempt to manage God. Prayer is not an attempt to manipulate God. The G word triggers people, of course, but the P word triggers people too. I went for decades, I grew up as an altar boy and praying, the rosary and all that. And then, by high school, you sort of lose that, and all through college, and really all through my 10 years, most of my 10 years teaching the kids in Houston, prayer wasn't anything to me. You sort of lose it. But then it came back. And Merton said he's got so many great statements about prayer, but he said you learn how to pray when your heart turns to stone and you cannot pray. Merton is nothing but paradoxical. But prayer is not an attempt to manipulate God into doing what your ego wants to do. No, God is not Santa. We got to get that into our head right now. God is not Santa. It's probably healthy that we just throw out the whole G word and the whole deal at some point, because that God that we had introduced to us that never got any bigger was too small for an adult, too small even for junior high kids or high school kids or college kids. But but so what we're trying to do. So I'm going to read you a couple things by Merton on this. Merton was very interesting. When he died in 68, graduated in 68, he was reading Meister Eckhart. Eckhart had become his favorite. He discovered him late, and boy, he really liked him. And, a guy like Eckhart, 14th century, a German, a priest, and he'd given a sermon. And in the sermon, he said, I pray to God to rid me of God. Just let that sink in for a minute. And he was preaching to nuns in German. Imagine what the nuns thought of that. I pray to God to rid me of God. Put that up on your wall. Now, what is he talking about here? Merton was the kind of guy who could dance with that, because he said, I pray to God to rid me of anything that was way too small for God. Now, Merton was writing a book in 68 called The Climate of Monastic Prayer, and I'm going to give you a little bit of that. By that time, Merton had gotten rid of all the gods that were too small. Here, I want to read you something he wrote about prayer in 68. It didn't get published to 73 because he died in 68, and it was 5 years more before, but they published it as is. It's called The Climate of Monastic Prayer. I want to read you from that, and then I want to read you something else that he wrote after he was in the monastery in 1941 for 2 weeks. And this is like, Merton is filled with this kind of paradox. I want to pray to God to rid myself of God. Well, here's Merton in 68. He says, true contemplatives, which is what this is all about in my book. I'm inviting you to come in and become true contemplatives and ultimately mystics. It's really the party here. True contemplatives do not prepare for a particular message they want to expect or hear in their contemplation, but they remain empty because they know that they can never anticipate the words that will transform their darkness into light. Get that? See, now, this is that empty cup thing. He says they don't come in expecting something or anticipating this or that, an answer for something. They remain empty. And the only way you do that is through your prayer. When you realize you're full of a lot of thoughts, even brilliant thoughts, dump it out. He says they remain empty because they know that they can never anticipate the words that will transform their darkness into light. And then he goes even further. So he's saying, give up trying to think of what, the way out of this darkness and waiting for the word to bring you out of the dark. You could never anticipate in a million years what it would be. I mean, I could never anticipate being here talking to you on this screen 40 years ago. but I came. See? And then in his last line, he says, you never can anticipate. You don't know even what word that will come from the holy mystery that's going to help you transform your darkness into light. And then he says, true contemplatives do not demand light instead of darkness. True contemplatives do not demand light instead of darkness. People go on strike for decades because they've been sitting in the silence and in the darkness waiting for the light, and it didn't come yet. And so they say, well, the hell with this. They go on strike for decades. I did. I wasn't even at that level, but I just let the whole project go. They do not demand light instead of darkness. Now that's 68. That's as ripe as Merton gets. Now here's what he wrote. He's in the monastery. He's Frater Mary Lewis, then no last name, head shaved, in this little taunch or crown of thorns that they were doing in 1941. Pearl Harbor had just happened. So we're going way back now, 27 years back to 41. He's in the monastery for 2 weeks, and it's getting ready. He's ready to go to midnight mass, and he jots this down, this poem. Your brightness is my darkness. I know nothing of you, and by myself, I cannot even imagine how to go about knowing you. If I imagine you, I am mistaken. If I understand you, I am deluded. If I am certain I know you, I am crazy. The darkness is enough. He's pretty ripe, whether he knew it or not. Listen to that again. This is again like he's 2 weeks. Your brightness is my darkness. Sometimes when you've been in the dark for a while, he'd been in his dark for 27 years. His life was really sort of a mess. I think he was on the edge of a nervous breakdown, perhaps. So much darkness, so much screw up, so much unfulfillment. And then he comes into this dark place. The monastery is a very dark place. Midnight mass, December 25th, darkness. He says, your brightness is my darkness. If somebody turns on the light right away, you're blinded. Your brightness is my darkness. I know nothing of you, and by myself, I cannot even imagine how to go about knowing you. He was clueless. And, the beauty of Merton, for reading his writing there for 27 years, is his humility. He just writes it down on the page, and you see that the guy said, I can't even imagine how to go about this thing. By myself, I cannot even imagine how to get to know you. If I imagine you, I'm mistaken. If I understand you, I'm deluded. If I am certain I know you, I am crazy. The darkness is enough. How wise is that? A 27-year-old. Yeah. The darkness is enough. So, we'll hear Merton's. If you came in a little bit early, you heard Kate Campbell. Kate Campbell's a singer, a Kentucky singer, who wandered into the monastery one time because she was interested in Merton. Everybody makes it there eventually. It's like a kind of pilgrimage, kind of for people who get into this seriously. And they have these little cards with a thing they call Merton's prayer on there, as if he only had one prayer, but it's from the Thoughts in Solitude. And she picked it up, and it's just one solid thing of prose here, but she heard the music in it, and so she put it to song, and we're going to use that to take us out of the mind. All traditions use music and sound to take us out of the mind, because ultimately the mind's concepts, thinking, words, great. I'm using words now to try to connect my heart to yours. So words are relatively real, but the way the heart deals with absolute reality is it resonates. The word resonate means to resound. And so sound is an interesting way to leave the world of conceptuals, relatively real stuff, to go to the heart, the cave of the heart, which is where we want to just sort of dwell for a while as much as we can. It's a lot of up and down for me, even after 50 years. I'm in the heart and I'm dwelling, and then all of a sudden I'm thinking of the next thing I want to say later or something, that I have to. So there's a lot of up and down sometimes. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes you can just rest there. Boy, bless those times. But in the prayer that you're going to hear, Merton's prayer, there's a couple of key things I really like about this prayer. He says, I have no idea where I'm going. Now, this is probably 1958 Merton. He'd been around. He had been 17 years in the monastery. And he wrote this a little bit before he had a street corner experience where he got, he saw everything in a flash, but he said, I have no idea where I'm going. So I don't see the road ahead of me. He says, I can't know for certain where it will end. Well, there really isn't any end to this eternal road. There's no end to eternity. As a little kid, I was want to be a priest, and I couldn't have put it into words. But when the nuns told me, nonology, it's not really good theology, but nonology is the best. A lot of these were just young girls. They got in habits and they start teaching kids, and they said, well, when you die, you go to eternity. Well, at least there was some place to go. It wasn't so scary, but I didn't even have words to ask the question, because I asked a lot of questions of these nuns, and they would always tell me the same thing. Well, Joseph, that's really a good question. Let's ponder that question, because they didn't know the answer to it. And that's another thing about this time and be a contemplative. Don't try to answer the questions. You got questions now. We all have a question. Your current life question, you got one. Don't try to think about the answer and figure it out. Cannot be done to the big questions. You have to put them, I like to say, put them on the altar of your heart and just let them rest there. And you go back there every day and you just hang out with it. That's what it means to ponder. Mary pondered all these mysteries in the silence of her heart, Luke says. And that's why she's the patron saint of contemplatives, because she's doing the heart work, you see. So he says, I don't know where I'm going. I don't even know if all my efforts are, maybe I'm going in the wrong direction. And the great trust in this thing is he's willing to go anyway. We came here without jobs because we felt this is the way we were called. Everybody thought we were crazy. My father he couldn't believe that we quit our jobs and we're moving to. He said, what the hell is in Kentucky? He said, he was living in Arizona. I could have said the same thing to him, but we came. And so Merton he's just going to keep taking the steps. Okay. And then towards the end of the prayer, he says, I know he has real trust. And we're talking about trust in what's moving all of this. I call it love. I'd say, trust the love that's moving this whole cosmos. You could call it wisdom and compassion. You could call it the Tao, all these traditions, the great spirit. You can call it whatever you want, but something moved me up here, and something protected me, and something gives grace to us all, whatever you want to call it. And Jesus called it love ultimately. He said, this force is love. That's the ticket. See, and he trusts that. He says, even though I don't know where I'm going, you will lead me by the right road, though I may know nothing about it. Boy, is that, do you know that line? I know that line. And then he said, therefore, I'll trust you always, though I may seem to be lost and in the shadow of death. I will not fear, for you're ever with me, and you will never leave me to face my perils alone. Well, we're heading towards that because we're talking about this mysterious thing called Christmas. It's not what you think it is. So we're gonna keep going on this Advent road. I said this was going to be like sailing through a tsunami, and the tsunami is this whole nonsense of buying stuff for Christmas, the Christmas season. It has a lot of momentum. You know it. Drives you crazy. Most people are tired out by now. Yeah. But the question we're facing is, what do you love? This little island of of our own certitude, you know, that's would be the ego, or are you loving a voyage on the vast ocean of really a mystery, you know, setting sail? You know, everybody else is just shopping. Are you interested in this? Yeah, I think you are. That's why you're here. Okay, well, I think that's good enough, and we'll just let's empty all of this cup now and just get ready to get even more empty and ponder what's going on right now.